Well, let's go ahead and get started. So we'll start by settling the body in a stable, comfortable, upright position, serviceable for meditation. So we think about keeping our back straight and our torso open. Our eyes are gently closed or slightly open. Our gaze is unfocused and downward. Hands are in the lap, right over left, with the palms upturned and the thumbs gently touching. Then we look through the body and try to notice if we're holding any places of unnecessary tension, trying to relax any rigidity in the body. We want to avoid slouching or leaning, but we also want to avoid tightness in the body. Want the body to hang on itself, to just fall into place. Move your awareness away from the external environment, letting the sights and sounds and smells and sensations just be as they are. Holding the awareness to the body and mind. And let go of thoughts of the past and plans for the future. Just holding the mind to the present moment, anchoring it by attending only to the physical sensations that accompany the in-breath and the out-breath in the area around the nostrils. Quickly noticing when anything other than that physical sensation arises in the mind, and gently lifting your awareness up from that distraction and placing it back on that present moment physical sensation. Breathing naturally and normally, and just holding to the sensation of the in-breath and the out-breath. And then when the mind feels more calm, establish a broad and altruistic motivation, thinking of our interdependence with all sentient beings and the kindness of all sentient beings and the status of all sentient beings as meeting again and again with obstacles and difficulties, never having true peace. And thinking that the more that we can develop our potential, the more benefit we can bring to sentient beings. And if we can unlock our highest potential for enlightenment, we can perfectly benefit sentient beings. So thinking of our time as creating the causes to be more and more effective for benefiting sentient beings. Today we'll meditate on growing and stabilizing our compassion toward sentient beings. Compassion is the wish that oneself and all other sentient beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. So we first bring to mind and imagine that a sentient being that we naturally hold quite dear, quite close, is seated in front of us, looking at us. And this sentient being is experiencing some kind of difficulty, some painful condition, circumstance. Could be something that you know that they are going through right now, or something that from time to time they tend to experience. We could use a future version of ourselves as this sentient being. And we could use a friend or loved one, or we could even use an animal. Just whatever we think is going to create the strongest, clearest, most innate, automatic wish for that sentient being to be relieved of that difficulty. However, we can generate the strongest, most stable feeling and visceral sense of immediately and deeply wishing for them to be relieved of that suffering. So determine that sentient being and imagine that as they sit in front of you, they are experiencing that obstacle. And notice in the body and mind the thoughts, the feelings, that visceral sense, what arises spontaneously and naturally, that deep-seated aspiration that this sentient being be relieved of that suffering. And try to stabilize that compassionate intention. And then allow that visualization of that person in front to dissolve. and replace it with the image of a person that you know, that you've seen, but that you haven't really interacted with. Someone that you've seen recently on the street or on television, but you don't really know. You don't have any strong thoughts or feelings about. Someone that you would classify as a stranger, but you know them well enough to bring their image to mind. And imagine that this person is again seated in front of you. And imagine that they too are experiencing a difficulty similar to the dear, close, sentient being was experiencing. Try to notice if there's a difference in the mind in observing this sentient being. Is there more of a sense of distance, separation? Try to recognize that this sentient being, like oneself, and those dear to oneself, deserves to be free of suffering and to be happy on an equal basis with all other sentient beings. And their label as a stranger's only dependent on their lack of history with oneself. Just that one criteria has established them in that category. They have friends and family, aspirations, fears, hopes and dreams. And they deeply wish to be free of all suffering and to have only happiness, just like oneself, and just like those dear to oneself. So try to remember what it was like in the body and mind to have that deep, stable, spontaneous, compassionate intention, and try to cause that to be generated again, now in relation to this sentient being. And then allow that visualization in front to dissolve and replace it with the image of a person in your life that you find a bit irritating, not the most difficult person you know, but someone that you find a little challenging to be around. And try to recognize that that irritation is again meaningless in the face of their status as a suffering sentient being. And try to notice, as you did before, if that irritation causes any distance, perhaps more distance than the stranger. And try to overcome that through that recognition that that distance comes only from their relation to just oneself and how insignificant that is. Imagine that this person is also experiencing a difficulty similar to the dear one and the stranger. And again, even if you just need to use a remembering consciousness to generate that compassionate intention, what did it or what would it feel like? Try again to generate that strong, compassionate intention, directing it toward this sentient being. And then when you're ready, we'll come back together. And then we'll dedicate. So recollect your altruistic motivation and think that you've actualized that motivation by meditating in this way, and that has created positive energy in the mind, and feel as though you offer that energy and your practice for the benefit of all sentient beings without exception, completely letting go of the sense of having done anything for oneself. Think may that energy ripen in whatever way sentient beings need, whatever is beneficial for sentient beings, up to and including their enlightenment, complete elimination of all suffering and establishment of all conducive, beneficial conditions. Think may it serve as a cause for one's own enlightenment, so that one gains the tools, the ability to be of perfect benefit to sentient beings. Think that it completely pacifies all obstacles to the Guru's long life, and that we and all sentient beings come under the joyful care of the enlightened beings, being guided and protected in this moment until our swift enlightenment. Thank you.